What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and I didn't feel like washing my hair today, so I'm rocking a beanie. A beanie brought to you by MagicJank.com. Feel free to check them out for all your Magic the Gathering products and gear. But that's not what we're here to discuss today, although they are great. I highly recommend you check them out. But we're here to discuss Phyrexia All-Will-Be-One spoilers. They're continuing, it's happening, and there is a ton of heat in this set. Now, at this point, we've seen most of the cards, not every last one, but we've seen a good chunk. There's been a very productive couple of days. And I wanted to talk about a handful that I think could be really impactful, some that kind of popped off the page and, you know, spawned a lot of conversation. So I kind of want to weigh in on them here. And we're going to start out with Vraan, Executioner Thane. I love aristocrat style strategies or reanimator style strategies. If I have an opportunity to pull stuff out of my graveyard or put stuff into my graveyard for value, I am very happy. That's kind of where I want to be. And this card looks like it's designed for me with one major flaw. So let's get into it. It is a 2/2 Phyrexian vampire for 1 and a black. Whenever one or more other creatures you control dies, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. This ability triggers only once each turn. That last sentence, that is the most bummer sentence on a Magic card. That said, if that wasn't there, this thing would be cracked in half and should at least cost 4. Because being able to ping for 2 every time something dies is bananas crazy. Cards like Blood Artist are already absolutely fantastic, and they only ping for 1. And they're already like staples in aristocrat styles across all kinds of different formats. So being able to do that and basically getting like a one-time Tendrils of Agony, you know, 2 life loss, 2 life gain, that's huge. Like that's really good. I like this card a lot. Only triggering once per turn is a huge bummer. It also only triggers like once, even if you have a number of creatures die all at once. You know, it says 1 or more other creatures. It also does not trigger when Vraan themselves die, so be aware of that too. That said, it is a vampire. It synergizes in older formats really, really nicely with cards like Veto or other cards that buff vampires. You know, your patrons of the vein and whatnot. So this is a card that as a 2-drop, even in something like Standard, I can see this actually getting a lot of play. Just a solid 2-drop. You get a 2/2 body, so a nice little bear. And it's kind of like Misery's Shadow in that regard, that it's just a really solid 2-drop that's not massively assuming on the field, but it has a very meaningful impact and will impact how the game goes. Like, if this is allowed to survive and your opponents don't answer it, even if you aren't leveraging like sacrifice strategies to really like amp this up to 11, even if you're doing stuff where your creatures are just attacking and dying in combat, then you're still getting pings. And this could easily give you a 4, 8, even 12 point life swing throughout the course of a game just by existing on the field. And right now, cards that just, you know, drain your opponent by existing on the field and the game progressing per usual is actually really nice. And this also gives black a little bit more reach beyond just Sheoldred to win without having to go into combat. Although, to be fair, a lot of black cards right now are great in combat. So, I mean, I'm not going to tell Tenacious Underdog not to swing. You know what I'm saying? But in any event, Vraan, Executioner, Thane, I think the card is actually pretty strong, but it's very limited. So to be honest, actually, I would, outside of like Oni Called Anvil decks, like if those start making a comeback in Standard, then I can see this. Otherwise, I don't think it's going to be that great. But as a 2-drop in old school sack, like older format sack decks, it's pretty solid. Most of those sack decks want to get multiple loops. Also, for the record though, this triggers once each turn, but that's on your turn and their turn. So if you're doing like Cat Oven loops, you can sacrifice something on your turn to get this ping, and then you pass to their turn, do another cat loop real quick, or sack the cat to the oven on your turn, and then pass turn, sack the food to get the cat out. Well, that actually wouldn't get it anyway, but because then the creature's not dying. I apologize. I'm thinking of Mayhem Devil. But it would be very easy to abuse this and time your sacrifice triggers in such a way that you hit on your turn and on their turn, and in Commander, you just time it so you ping as you go around the table. Like, it wouldn't be that hard to abuse this. I think it's good. I like, bottom line, I think the card's good. All right, next up, we have Mindsplice Apparatus. Pardon me. This is the site I'm using has like a spoiler photo, so we do see someone's thumb. Which I mean, they're taking good care of themselves, so rock on. They have it looks like a healthy cuticle there. But in any event, Mindsplice Apparatus. It is an artifact for 3 into blue with flash. At the beginning of your upkeep, put an oil counter on Mindsplice Apparatus. Instants and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to activate for each oil counter on Mindsplice Apparatus. Now, there are a lot of cards in this set that have proliferate on them incidentally. There are also some really, really big bomb instants and sorceries in a lot of different formats, in a lot of different colors. Like we have the Twilights, the Twilight Cycle that all have X in them. This doesn't say anything about not being able to use that cost reduction towards an X value. That doesn't say anything about that, so go nuts. So all of a sudden, all those Twilight cards can get supercharged with this really fast. Cards like Hurkyl's Final Meditation are also not really seeing any play right now because the thing costs freaking 10. Well, all of a sudden with Mindsplice Apparatus, it just doesn't anymore. It costs way less than that as the game progresses. So I think this card has an opportunity to really supercharge some strategies and be incredibly powerful in more controlling decks that are trying to let the game go long. This is a very, very, very powerful effect, and Wizards knows it, and as a result, they put it on a 4-drop. It's a 4-drop artifact, no less, so it would not be that hard to remove. Let's be real. So, you know, the idea is you wait until your opponent's end step, you flash it in, you go to your upkeep, you put an oil counter on this thing, and all of a sudden now all your spells are costing less. Great. That also includes things like Silver Scrutiny, by the way. So Silver Scrutiny that can just draw you a ton of cards. Note, this does not synergize particularly well with Memory Deluge. So Memory Deluge is a really powerful card because it draws you get to pick 2 cards out of the top 4, and then when you flash it back out of the top 7. But the number of cards you look at is tied to the amount of mana you spend. So if you free cast Memory Deluge, you look at 0 cards. And you can put up to 2 cards from among those 0 cards in your hand. Obviously, that doesn't work. So with Mindsplice Apparatus, the moment you reduce the cost on Memory Deluge, it becomes much, much, much less effective. So I would use card draw spells that are different, that aren't leveraging that same type of clause if you're going to take advantage of this. But yeah, in a deck that has a lot of instant speed interaction. So if you're looking at like an Is-It Spellslinger situation that's running a lot of counters, and maybe you're like Third Path Iconoclasts, that kind of thing. Although actually in that deck, I think you want to be faster than this. So I guess I'd be looking for more of a traditional control shell, where the goal is you hold up a ton of counter spells, prevent your opponent from establishing threats, wipe the board if you have to, but on the turn when your opponent is playing around your counters and doesn't play any threats out, you drop this thing, and then they either have to remove it or you're off to the races because now all your stuff is like all of it's at a discount pretty much immediately. Yeah, I think this card's actually really cool. I don't think it's a 4-of in pretty much any deck, but if you're running a lot of big bomb spells, this thing actually has the opportunity to be pretty great. I'm kind of bummed we don't have Magma Opus in the format anymore because that would couple with this just perfectly. So in older formats, cards like Sublime Epiphany, Magma Opus, those like big bombs that do like crazy nonsense but are just a little too expensive to justify most of the time, you might be able to get away with those with this thing. Anyway. Oh, it's also an artifact. Power Stone mana can be used on this. Just saying. All right, next up. So we have another... This card, actually, I'm afraid... Okay, this card, I know the color, or the image that I'm looking at here is not in English. So for all my fellow English speakers, I'm sorry, but I'm happy to read it off for you. This card is Argentum Masticore. It is a 5/5 for 5 colorless artifact creature with first strike, protection from multicolor, and at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice it unless you discard a card. When you discard a card this way, destroy target non-land permanent an opponent controls with mana value less than or equal to the mana value of the discarded card. So if you have a deck that is running a lot of expensive spells, this thing's pretty great. Now, Masticores have this history of being not quite as good as you may think they are. I know there was a Masticore that came out in like M20 at a time when Teferi Teferi Time Raveler was like running rough shot over standard, and I was like, this Masticore is gonna be our answer, and it way wasn't. Like, it wasn't even close. That thing sucked eggs. Then a protection from Planeswalkers though, how bad could it be? And this is another one of those situations. It has protection for multicolor and first strike on a 5/5 colorless body for 5. That's just, I mean, this reads like it should be great, and it's an artifact creature, so Power Stones can be a factor here. Like colorless ramp style decks, this reads like it should be really good, right? You know, even if you have a Transpire on 4, you can drop this, or Transpire on 3, drop this on 4. The problem with this card is that you have to discard a card on your upkeep. That is so much more awkward than having to discard a card at any other time. And the problem with this is that if you can't discard a card, you lose the creature. Like, the whole upside is just gone. So that really bites. You know, cards like Rotting Regisaur force you to discard a card on your upkeep, but if you don't have any cards to discard, it's just like, yeah, you good, bro, whatever. And you're fine. Like, it just chills, and there's no issue. But in this case, if you don't have the card, it gets pissed and wanders off, or, well, dies. Like, I don't know, it gets hungry, or I don't know what's going on flavorfully. But if you're in a deck that's running a ton of really powerful, really big stuff, potentially trying to reanimate it out of the graveyard with like Invoke Justices or, you know, Repair Recharge, that kind of thing, all of a sudden being able to drop, you know, a 9-drop Portal to Phyrexia to this thing and blow up whatever you want of your opponents while you have a 5/5 first striker that just incidentally has protection from multicolor on it. Like, if they want to block with that Blood Tithe Harvester or that Corpse Appraiser, like, tough luck. You just can't. I mean, this thing looks solid. Like, it has the upside, but the downside is also really, really, really big, and it's worse than it reads if you're not familiar with this kind of effect. So, like, be wary with this one. This is definitely a build around. Like, if I'm going to be putting this in a deck, I need to have a lot of plans around it. This is not going to be a generically powerful card. It's just not. Especially with cards like Liliana running around and people attacking the hand, especially coming out of sideboards with like Duress and Dreams of Steel and Oil, that kind of thing. Like, your hands are not safe right now. You will have to discard a lot of cards. And so having to discard additional cards, even with the upside that this thing provides, the cost it's huge. Absolutely huge. This is the kind of card that doesn't, like, I'm sure newer players would look at it and go, this thing's amazing. What, like, it can't go wrong. Why, like, what, you know? But, I mean, unless you're leveraging your graveyard, and or you have a lot of card draw, because your hand has got to be stacked if you're gonna be dancing with this thing. So, you gotta be aware of that. But I like the design. I'm intrigued by the possibilities. I'm intrigued by this card very much. As somebody who loves his discard, I'm very intrigued by it. So, I don't know. I'll probably try it, but I don't think that... Here I am saying this card is super interesting and super fun, but at the same time, I don't think it's going to see any meaningful play, and I think a lot of competitive decks are going to... I think a lot of competitive players are going to just write this off immediately, and I think they're right to do so, unfortunately, but we'll see. All right, next up. Here's another one that is not in English, I'm afraid, so again, apologies. But this is Serum Core Chimera. This is actually an uncommon. It is a 2/4 flyer for 2 blue-red with flying. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it. Remove 3 oil counters from Serum Core Chimera, or Chimera, sorry. Draw a card. Then you may discard a non-land card. When you discard a card this way, the Chimera deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Play this ability as a sorcery. So the fact, Izzet Spellslinger is a style of deck that we don't really have right now, but we have had in the past. And we have Third Path Iconoclast, which is an enabler for the Izzet Spells deck that very few, like, that sees play, like, back to Legacy, if I'm not mistaken. It's just kind of amazing. And so this is another tool in that deck's toolkit, if you will, because it gives you potential card advantage while also just giving you a 2/4 flyer, which is not bad. And then you also have the potential to be able, you could effectively turn any one of your cards in hand, any of your non-land cards, into Lightning Bolt. Well, Strangle, I guess. But, like, sweet. Like, that's just solid. This is a card that I find very interesting. I think the design is kind of cool, and I like it. That said, I fully understand that at 4 mana, the kind of spells deck wants to already be going off. Like if a traditional spells deck, especially when trying to leverage something like Third Path Iconoclast that just like rocks out a token every single time you cast a spell, if you're trying to take advantage of cards like that, when you have 4 mana available, you want that to be at least 2 spells, if not 3. You know, so you want that to be your Impulse, your Consider, your Play with Fire, your Fading Hopes. That's where you want to be like jamming those spells. That's where you really want to start going pew pew and letting your engine really pop. That's usually where you want to be. So dropping a setup piece like this at 4 better be awesome. Like the last big bomb 4-drop is it like finisher that I remember seeing actually get like some decent play in Standard was Crackling Drake back in the Return to Ravnica. And it was fine. Like, I mean, actually, that card was pretty solid. Is It Drake's was legit, to be sure. But that card got a power buff based on how much was in your graveyard. It's actually more similar to Haughty Djinn, which is an amazing finisher already and available in blue. So Is It would be able to run it pretty comfortably, and probably should, if I'm honest. Although, with Haughty Djinn, why would you need red? As we're seeing right now with the mono blue deck in Standard as of this recording. So I think this card is a cool signpost, which actually I believe it is the signpost uncommon, for draft. So this is a really cool draft card if the Is It spell deck is viable in draft. The other one thing I want to point out though is proliferate. If you are proliferating, this being able to, like every time you get 3 counters on this thing, you can just pull them off and draw a card. Like the floor on this is draw a card. I mean, those are the 3 best words you can get in Magic, right? I've come to the conclusion the best sentence in Magic is draw a card or draw X cards. And the worst sentence is this trigger only occurs once per turn. That's the conclusion that I'm coming to. And this has draw a card on it. So I think limited players keep an eye out for the Is It Spells deck. I think that has a possibility. And this is going to be a key piece of it. As far as Standard or like Commander is concerned, we have better options, I'm afraid. But it's a cool card, cool design. I like it. All right, next up. We have possibly the card I'm most excited to talk about today, and that is Tyvar's Stand. So this artwork actually hit Twitter, and I did a whole video about it because I was like, holy crap, Tybalt's completed. Also, Tyvar was safe because that was the first time we like got confirmation of that. And frankly, dude looks totally awesome. Like, so Tyvar rocking it, not being a throwaway character. He is here to stay, and he's here to kick some butts. Primarily Phyrexian double butts. So here we are. And Tyvar's Last Stand kicks so much butts. So much butts? Yes, so much butts. This card is amazing. It's an instant for X and a green. Target creature you control gets +X and gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This is possibly one of the best combat tricks we have ever seen. And the reason I say that, this is possibly one of the strongest combat tricks we've ever seen. Definitely a mono green. One of the best. Because this does... It just does so much. It's more than just a combat trick. This is a combat trick. Yes, you can use it to pump in damage based on how much mana you have available, or to blow out somebody in combat. Like if they're chump blocking a 1/1 with a threat you need to get off the board, all of a sudden that 1/1 is going to grow out of control and gain indestructible and just eat that other creature alive. So that's fantastic. But it's not just a combat trick. Like, this is so much more than that. Instant speed +X for just X and a green is already pretty good. Like, you can already do a lot with that if you're creative in how you deploy it. But the floor on this is giving a creature hexproof and indestructible for 1. 1 green, hexproof and indestructible at instant speed. Boom. Your opponent is trying to remove your 3-drop. Nope. Just nope. It's now here. Like, it's not going anywhere. And all it took was 1 mana. And so this is great in the early game when you're trying to protect your threats, which green needs because the removal is ubiquitous right now. This doesn't help against like Invoke Despair or Sheoldred's Edict or Liliana the Veil, those like targeted sack effects. But against your Go for the Throats, your Infernal Grasps, Fateful Absences, and the like, this is cash money in the bank. So I love that. And then in the late game, if you top it late, this is going to enable an alpha strike. You can swing with absolutely everything, and whatever worst case scenario, whatever they don't block gets +X, where X is, 1 minus the available mana you have. And all of a sudden, like, you're probably going to be pushing another 5-6 damage that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And That's going to throw off your opponent's combat math in a big way, or force them to use instant speed interaction that they wouldn't have needed to do otherwise. This card's great. It's freaking amazing. It is the power boost. It is the kind of combat trick, the kind of spell green needed to get. It's kind of if Primal Might and Primal Might and Tamiyo's Safekeeping got together, and this is what you get. I like it. I like it a lot. This card rules. All right, and finally, the last card I want to talk about today. It actually leverages a keyword mechanic that I don't think we've talked about yet today, and no, it is not for Mirrodin. I will be talking about that at some point, but I gotta be honest, those cards, I am not intrigued by those at all, which is a shame, because equipment's rad, but anyway, I digress. Vivisection Evangelist. This is a 4/4 Vigilant Phyrexian Cleric for 3 white-black with Corrupted. Did I mention it was Vigilant? Because it's Vigilant. Corrupted. When Vivisection Evangelist enters the battlefield, if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters, destroy target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. So Corrupted is a new keyword ability that is similar to like Landfall, where it's like one of those like flavor words where they still explain everything about it on the field or on the card, which is fine. It makes it a little easier to read and easier for newer players and stuff. So rock on. But it's just nice. Like there was a keyword from back in the day, like way back in the day, called Threshold. And a card met Threshold when you had 7 or more cards in your graveyard. And so certain cards would be like turned on once you had Threshold. And we've noticed that also with cards like, with like the City's Blessing and that kind of thing, where like once you've reached a certain state, you now have achieved, this particular game state, and now the cards act a little differently. Well, Phyrexia has that in Corrupted. And it's only 3. So if you can get your opponent to 3 poison counters, which I'll be honest, I think that is going to be just shockingly easy. I think if you are trying to run poison, like if you are intentionally running poison counters, which you would have to be to really make this card sing, honestly, because on its face, 4/4 Vigilance for 5, even as a cleric, that's not worth it. But 4/4 Vigilance for 5 enters the battlefield, destroy target creature, planeswalker, and opponent controls. Now we're talking. That's actually fantastic. This is like kind of a new Raven's Chupacabra, and I love that. I love that effect. It is super powerful. You kind of can't go wrong. And it's in black-white, which I don't know. I like Orzhov. They're nice. So, I think, so Corrupted makes a lot of sense. I think Corrupted is a cool mechanic, because in the past, poison counters were just like this new life total that just goes to 10. That's kind of all they were, it's just like if you get your opponent to 10 poison counters, they lose, but like everything along the way just kind of was. And that's what made like a Johnny Sleeper Agent in a vacuum, like that ultimate. I think the card was actually better than people gave it credit for, but not for the ultimate. The ultimate gave you an emblem that allowed you to put poison counters on your opponent. When it was the only poison counter card in Standard, that emblem is laughable. It's absolutely terrible. I've gone for it a couple of times just to see if I can make it work. Almost never works. I think I've won maybe one historic brawl match doing that, but anyway, it's bad. It's very, very difficult. It almost never works. But now we have a lot of other ways to apply poison counters, and Corrupted cares about your opponent just having 3. Getting to 3 is not hard. Getting to 10 is tricky, but getting to 3, that should be pretty easy. And I have a feeling in some of these colors, I know green, we've seen green poison cards so far are like insane. Like green is going to be stacking poison counters like mad. So I have a feeling there might be like an Abzan poison counter deck that can take advantage of this. And the reason I say there might be one is I might be building one, because this looks freaking rad. Again, a Ravenous Chupacabra style effect. And on top of that, this isn't, in like a way that Wizards has balanced a lot of ETB triggers recently is by saying when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, do this thing. You'll notice Vivisection Evangelist doesn't say that. It just says when it enters the battlefield, if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters, destroy target creature opponent. So once they have the 3 poison counters, you can blink this, you can reanimate this, you can loop it, you can you get crazy, get stupid. You can you can blast your opponent for you can destroy everything they have with these, just looping or cloning, or it can get silly, and I like that. I like that a lot. So can Orzhov get early poison counters? I think the answer to that's probably yes. Probably yes by a lot, actually. Come to think of it, the whole white might situation, like creating toxic tokens, might be a very easy way to get there now that I think about it. So yeah, I think this card, those 3 poison counters, that's not even an issue. That's not even a consideration. That's going to be super easy. So I don't know. I could be wrong on that. Because Wizards picked 3 for a reason. Like, they picked 3 as the number for a reason. Like, if you ask me, if someone were to pitch the corrupted mechanic to me and say, we want to do something where cards are supercharged once a certain threshold of poison counters are met, what do you think that should be? I would have said like 5. Like, I would have said 5 is like a good reason. Hey man, if I need 20 cards in my graveyard for Cemetery Tampering or new Jace to get supercharged, like if new graveyard threshold is 20 rather than 7, then corrupted should be higher than 3. But it is 3, so we can take advantage of that. And in this case, the payoff is actually awesome. Plus is an uncommon, which when you're building like on a budget on Arena and stuff, I know that matters. So cool. Or again, like if you're doing like historic brawl shenanigans, like if you're building anything with poison counters, you need as many options as you can get. Notably, the Evangelist itself does not have toxic natively. So it cannot apply poison counters to allow future Evangelists to come down with the corrupted trigger. So be aware of that. When you're planning your decks out, make sure that your toxic threats or your poison counter enablers or your poison counter appliers, the ones that actually are putting the poison counters on your opponent, are low. Make sure they're cheap. And make sure you have some decent like proliferates as well, because I think proliferate and poison is going to be nuts. But this is a great payoff. This is just a straight up great payoff. So, and the corrupted, I think, is a cool mechanic. It makes a lot of sense because there are now multiple thresholds. Like before, if your opponent was attacking you with like with a toxic creature, an infect creature, a poison counter creature, you were just kind of doing the math. It's like, okay, is that going to put me to 10? If the answer is not, bring it in, whatever. It doesn't matter. Now you have this thought of like, well, maybe I should block that because if it gets to 3, what else is going to happen? I like that. I think that's cool. So anyway, thank you so much for checking out the video. I appreciate it very, very much. We have more individual card discussions coming. Don't worry, because there's tons to unpack here. This set looks like it's going to be impactful. Whether that's going to be good or bad, we'll see. But it's definitely going to be impactful. So thanks so much. I appreciate you, and I'll catch you on the next one.